This October, darken Poe's chamber door as we celebrate 180 years of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. Join us for the International Edgar Allan Poe Festival and Awards, sponsored by Wells Fargo. 3 days of Poe-themed festivities. General admission is free. Don't miss special ticketed events. Visit PoeFestivalInternational.org for tickets and information. Look into my eyes. Listen to my voice. You are in Baltimore. You hear voices calling, nevermore, nevermore. The streets alive, a dream within a dream. And now, shadows lengthen, night falls. In the distance, a dark and brooding hall. Yes, walk closer. All around you, trance and shadow, dreams within dreams. The doors open, and behold, a mesmeric revelation. Enter as one soul, leave as another, waltz among phantoms, sip potions red as your own beating heart. Lose yourself in the rhythm as Edgar Allan Poe's world closes in around you. And perhaps, like one of his tales, you will wake, not knowing if it was a dream or doom. The Black Cat Ball, Mesmeric Masquerade. For tickets and information, visit PoeFestInternational.org.
So my name is Jason Markiewicz, and I'm the owner and proprietor of Markiewicz Audio Works. This is an audio drama or audio theater company that does full cast audio dramas of works of classic fiction. I've been an Edgar Allan Poe fan for as long as I can remember, probably since the first time I read The Cask of Amontillado back in maybe 6th grade or 7th grade. And so learning his works and reading a variety of short stories and tales and poems over the years, as I became an audio drama producer and a voice actor, one of the first things I wanted to do was try to bring Edgar Allan Poe stories to life in a different way. So this year, I submitted our version of The Telltale Heart. This one was a lot of fun for me to do because the story itself is told in a first person narrative style, and of course as an audio drama you want to try to create multiple characters and you want to make sure that you're doing it theatrically. So I had to write a lot of dialogue myself, and I really had to try to bring in some of the ways that I think the story can be told in a theatrical style more so than a first person narrative tale. Created some situations about a breakfast time the morning after the narrator, who I've named Edward Valentine, goes up to see the old man in his room, and then starts to just have a discussion with him. And that's when we first learn that the old man did hear the squeak of the light as the light was opened in the room that night, even though Edward was being very careful and very quiet to not make any noise as he spied upon the old man. But I have recorded all the voice, and I've started to get sound effects created for Mask of the Red Death, and that'll be our next one. Right now, we've got The Raven completed, Manuscript Found in a Bottle, The Telltale Heart, Cask of Amontillado, and then the Mask of the Red Death will be our fifth and final for a little bit. So those five will be the initial set of Poe-themed audio drama productions that we're deciding to do. Then after that, we're going to look at a little bit more creative ways to maybe use Poe themes and maybe even some characters into some original works. And so I'm currently writing a first episode of what I hope to be a larger production that is more episodic in nature, that can follow through seasons, that is largely based on Poe's characters and their personalities and things, but set in a different context. And so that's something that we're kind of crafting in right now. But our next production will be Mask of the Red Death. So all of our work is available once it's put out to the public. You can find them on Audible and audiobooks.com and a lot of the places that are distributed for audio books or audio dramas. you can go to our website at www.markiewitzAudioworks.com. And there you can find all of the audio books that I personally have narrated, as well as our audio drama productions and some of the other voiceover work that I do. But then we can also take a look at YouTube. And on YouTube, we'll have trailers and clips and some behind the scenes. We'll also have full productions of each of the ones that we have distributed out to the public are available there for everyone to listen to. So any of those ways are great. Please follow, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and help support us in our future projects.
Like I said, I'm Frank Messely. I'm a Belgian screenwriter and filmmaker. Well, I've always been, I'm a Belgian screenwriter and filmmaker, and I've been fascinated by Edgar Allan Poe ever since I was probably 8 years old. I saw something on a television my parents were watching, and I wasn't allowed to watch because this was too creepy and scary. So you just have to tell a kid not to watch something. And I tried to see certain fragments of the film that was playing. Actually, it was a Roger Corman film on television, probably The House of Usher or something like that. So I was intrigued by these images, and I decided the name Poe stayed with me. So I was probably 10 years or 9 years old then, and many years later, I was 15 or 16, we had to go to the library in art school to choose a novel, a literary work, and I thought, well, maybe it's a good idea to take Edgar Allan Poe. And back then, I really thought this was pulp fiction. I thought it was just creepy horror tales. Little did I know that it was actually a literary classic, one of the most important names in American literature. So I took the book with me and I started reading. The first one I read was Fall of the House of Usher, and I was really blown away by the atmosphere of that story. The next morning, before going to school, I read The Oval Portrait. Well, the first version in 1977 was just something that used the premise of the story, but I changed a lot. It wasn't even a novel portrait. It was a portrait. I had painted a portrait of a crazy-looking mad woman, since I wanted it to be a little bit more creepy and horror. So that was totally different from the only thing that was the same was the nobleman and his servant that arrive at the castle and stay there for the night, and then they discovered a painting. But my film that I started in 2008 and that I finished in 2022, I wanted to stay more closer to the original story. And like we have the story within the story where the protagonist eventually discovers the little book on the bed, and he starts reading, and then we get a flashback sort of about the previous tenants of this castle. So I stayed pretty close to this, but I also changed certain elements to make it even more visual, and I consciously chose for a silent film because I think Poe's universe is in fact best conveyed by a film that uses a soundscape and also sound effects, but with as less dialogue as possible. Of course, his stories with dialogue, that's
Yeah, so my name's Hannah Raven, and I'm based in Sydney, Australia. And I am an actor and a professional burlesque artist. I got into Poe about 25 years ago when I saw a production of Barry Kosky's The Telltale Heart. Those of you who don't know Barry Kosky, he's an opera director. He's quite controversial. And he did a production with a one-man Poe, a huge production in Australia. I think it was touring. And it took my breath away. I was like, oh my God, like, what is this story? Who is this character? What's going on? And then I went and bought a Poe book, and I was like, oh, I've found my Lord and Savior. So I was just absolutely obsessed with the work, the horror, the poetry. So yeah, that kind of just started this snowball effect. And then as a theatre maker, so I run my own company called Raven Productions Australia, and all our work is based on Poe. So we do burlesque shows based on Poe, so one-woman shows based on Poe. And so that's kind of where it came from. Being an actor, I was like, I want to create as much work as I can. And then Poe was such a muse and influence to me that the two of them just kind of molded together. And so, yeah, now everything I create is always influenced by Poe. Well, the main thing with working with Poe text is it's so vast. He wrote so many stories, so much poetry, and also essays and critiques. You know, his like literary career is extremely vast, which a lot of people don't know about. They just think, oh, he writes scary stories. It's like, no, he was a critic, a very harsh critic, and he wrote essays, and he just everything that he does is inspiring to me. And it also means when I go to create work, there is so much fodder to play with. So this labor of love for me took quite a few years to get off the ground. I started creating it during 2020, which we know was the time of COVID. So I had a theatre set up, and then everything closed. We went into lockdown. Then we went into lockdown the following year. And so all the plans I'd made to kind of get this show up and running just kept getting quashed, you know? And, there were times I was like, oh, well, maybe it's just not meant to be. And I was like, nah, this is my passion project. I want to do it. And I mean, I love the story. I love the way it's written. I love that it's about psychological introspection. So we have someone talking to us saying, you think I'm mad. I'm not mad. I'm clear as day about everything I did. It was calculated. It was intelligent. It was the perfect crime. And so, but you're reading it going, oh, but the things you've done would indicate maybe you're a little unhinged. The fact that the narrator is never actually revealed in terms of gender. So me as a female identifying actor, I was like, I want to do this story and I want to play the character, because nothing to say it's not a woman. And also during the time period it's written and what that person's job or their duties are for the old man, I was like, I feel like this is a caretaker or a maid or a matron of some kind. So I decided to play the character as a maid, like a chambermaid who was taking care of an elderly man. And from a female perspective, I wanted to make it a feminist story about a woman trapped by her circumstances, and that the reason she goes to commit this murder is because it's a form of vigilantism or revenge or escapism from her prison. The Case of M. Valdemar, 100%. I love that story. It's one of my favorite Poe stories. And I'd love to play the hypnotist, the mesmeric individual. But then I'm like, how do I get a body to melt on stage? That's now the next, white whale, the challenge. I'd really like to tackle that somehow. I think it's really fascinating. So my production company is called Raven Productions Australia. So ravenproductionsaustralia.com is my main website. We're also on Instagram, Raven Productions Australia. I also run the Edgar Allan Poe Australia Society. So on Instagram, just Edgar Allan Poe Australia. And the same, edgarallanpoeaustralia.com. So if you go to those, you can see all the work I've done. You can see what's also happening in Australia with Poe fans, because there are so many Poe fans over here, and we are probably the farthest away from where he lived and did his work. And that's what his reach has done. It's gone literally to the other side of the world.
First, I am very delighted to participate in this year's Post festivity. My name is Qing Sun Stubis. I am a writer, a newspaper columnist, a poet, a storyteller, and obviously a Poe lover. I really enjoy his works. My poem, The Forever Life of Edgar Allan Poe, was inspired by a series of strange events that took place over the course of nearly 40 years. When I was in college in Shanghai, China, in the late 70s, I just stumbled upon a copy of a book called 101 Poems. And inside there was Shakespeare, Robert Burns, William Wordsworth, and then, of course, Edgar Allan Poe. And his poem, The Raven, just so inspired me. For some reason, I just was enchanted by the poem. So I copied down the entire poem in a notebook and I placed it underneath my pillow. And every night before I fell asleep, I would read his poem. It's almost like an epilogue. And it starts from the very beginning of his life, how he moved around, how as a poet, he tried hard to make a living with his words, and also about his mysterious death and about the mysterious person who came to his tomb and had a ceremonial type of service mysteriously on his anniversary, and yet how nobody could ever catch that person. And in the very end, I ended the poem with the sight that I saw when I was visiting his house with all the blackbirds. And of course, the theme, forevermore and nevermore, resonates the poem. I would say right now, it is The Black Cat. I am very inspired by this year's ball, the Black Cat Ball. And also, I think it is one of his like scariest, darkest stories. So I really feel there's so much to explore as far as from the psychology point of view, and also the whole human nature, the mystery of the cat. This particular story was first published in 1843. And in some ways, I feel it still reflects the life of human beings, the mysteries, and our nature, and alcoholism, and everything. I am really enchanted by the way how the voice of an alcoholic man whose passion and obsession about the animals would eventually turn into cruelty, abuse, and then murder. Well, I am the writer, the author of a historical Chinese memoir called Once Our Lives. It's a book about 4 generations of Chinese women struggling against war, revolution, and ancient Chinese superstition that taunted the family for nearly years. So there is the spooky side of Poe in my memoir. And also the readers can step into the shoes of those 4 generations of Chinese women and explore their lives through their eyes and through the history. And anyone who is interested to find me, they can find me through my website, www.qingsunstubis.com, or follow me on my Facebook and Instagram. And also they can read a lot of my podcast interviews online as well if they Google my name.
My name is Aaron J. Reardon. I am the writer and host of two podcasts, one called Celine and the other one called Plant Murder. Celine is actually a narrated fiction podcast that's inspired by Poe. It is about a haunted city, a strange city lying alone. And Plant Murder is a podcast that examines the mysteries of history and the histories of deadly plants. I've been a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, and he's been very inspiring to me for almost all of my writing career for decades. But it was only recently when I was trying to do a piece that was heavily inspired in a 19th century style that I actually kind of dove deeply into his correspondence, because I think I find that a little different than his prose, and the eloquence and patience and style and art of his prose really inspired me. And when it was during that I actually stumbled upon what in his biography was the mystery of his final days and all of the theories about how Poe actually passed. And when I encountered that, I felt like I really needed to do an episode of Plant Murder to cover all of the varying theories, some valid, some a bit not so valid, about those mysterious missing 5 days and how he might have actually met his end and to be found on a street in Baltimore. Plant Murder, Poe versus the Ugni Blanc grape, is about exploring the mystery of those missing 5 days so that those people who I think there's a lot of fans of Poe, there's a lot of people who know The Raven and his work, but aren't actually familiar much with his biography or familiar with that key 5 missing days and his last moments. And so I felt important to kind of peel the onion and actually follow all of those trails in our, immersive sound podcast to really kind of explore each one, to kind of look down the road of, was it rabies? Was it, alcohol? Was it cooping? Was it any of those things? Ultimately, the episode was about the relationship between him and what I thought was going to be whether or not he was an alcoholic, and wine and other spirits led to his death. But what it became was this amazing exploration of his life and his family, and then the Ugni Blanc grape became a relationship with his legacy, which is effectively the Poe toaster with, the cognac that was left of his gravesite. And it even opens up with an invitation to any of us. Are you going to be the next Poe toaster? Are you going to be the person that carries on Poe's legacy into the future? I mean, he continues to be an influence in every way. I write certain works with a 19th century kind of flair, and I'm constantly going back to his correspondence. It is one of the touchstones, I would say, of a very patient and elaborate style that we lose with modernism. A lot of modern communication is almost Hemingway obsessed. It's very short, very efficient sentences. And I feel like Poe's correspondence and a lot of his work is sort of the opposite of that. And I think we lose something when we kind of abandon that flair and the craft of language. And I think he was one of the masters in it. So I think in that sense, overall, absolutely. I would say I have been rereading The Black Cat considerably, and I think re-examining that. I think it's really interesting how potent and intimate that story is, and yet there's almost a casualness to the violence of it. And so I feel like I haven't completely cracked that in my own meditations. And so I've been rereading that over and over again in the last few months. You can find the Plant Murder podcast or the Celine podcast wherever podcasts are found. You can find everything about me and all of my works at cleverthen.com, and you can support the shows at Patreon at Cleverthen.
Once, upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary, thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door, quoth the raven, nevermore. This October, darken Poe's chamber door as we celebrate 180 years of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. Join us for the International Edgar Allan Poe Festival and Awards sponsored by Wells Fargo. 3 days of Poe-themed festivities, performances, vendors, music, and food to benefit the Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum in Baltimore. General admission is free. Don't miss special ticketed events. Festival weekend is October 3rd through 5th. Join us in celebrating Poe's legacy in Baltimore and beyond. Visit PoeFestInternational.org for tickets and information.